last time and discuss a further aspect of it. And the further aspect that I will be talking about tonight is the aspect of alignment. And I'm talking and calling tonight's talk, Aligning Life with Life. I thought it would be best to just do a little bit of a recap because a lot of you weren't here. People who were here aren't tonight and vice versa. And say that, that these are times, we all know so very well, incredible times of diversity and of conflict and of polarization internationally and certainly here at home. And we are experiencing, of course, an election season that is, I think, unprecedented in all of our experiences. And all of this is a tremendous sense, I think. We often feel battered. And in addition to all of this, there are the global changes that are in the process of occurring. All of this in the context of the global changes. Climate, extinction of different species, the degradation of the environment, the exploitation of resources, things that we seem to be on the cusp of changes that are unprecedented. And I think the overall effect of all of it can be really filled with anguish for us. In fact, heartbreak. I think a lot of us experience that very, very often. And the question arises, how do we live with some kind of sanity? How do we live with love and equanimity amidst all of these tensions and pushes and pulls? I certainly don't have the answer. I don't think there is the answer. But I do know that there are several that I think we all have come up with at different times. And working for a cause that we feel will make a difference is one of them. Sometimes ignoring it all and just getting on with our life can be wholesome for a time. And the cultivation of kindness and compassion, which is so important in these days when so many people seem to be shutting down, part of our practice, opening our hearts, even with people that we don't seem to agree with at all. And then there is another response, and it's one that I mentioned last time, and that is the age-old spiritual wisdom of acceptance. And I think this is such a hard one to understand, or even to kind of cotton up to. Acceptance, it sounds like what? We have to kind of accept that these horrible things are happening and just do nothing about it. That's not at all what it means. I'd like to talk about this acceptance from a spiritual point of view. Because the truth is, our minds cannot accept. How can we accept? I mean, all you have to do is see a polar bear sitting on an ice cap that's floating around up at the North Pole, and your heart wrenches. Not to mention the many, many, many other things. How can we accept those things? And I will suggest that really, you can't from our everyday mind. Our hearts, they get so torn and anguished by these things. I think this acceptance refers to something else. And it isn't what our everyday mind can embrace. On the human level, it's just too hard to embrace it. It's got to come, I think, from another perspective. This acceptance involves a significant inner journey. And I would like to read a small poem. I read it last time, I'm going to read it again, by the Spanish poet Juan Ramón Jiménez, because he refers to what this inner journey is. And he says, I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against a great thing. and nothing happens. Nothing. Silence. Waves. Nothing happens? Or has everything happened? And we are standing now, quietly, in the new life. Juan Ramon Jimenez, having struck against a great thing in the depths. He's not the only one. Jimenez isn't the only one who writes about this amazing opening. And we often talk about other poets, Hafiz, Rumi, who have done the same thing. And tonight I thought I would quote another poet, an American, a contemporary. Her name is Jennifer Wellwood. And in her poem, Anchored Against the Tides, she writes, "Know the silence that lives at the depth of things. Now the dissonance of the world can't overwhelm you. Know the radiance that shines forth as the nature of all things. Now you can face into the darkness and not waver. Know yourself nakedly, O bright expanse of wakefulness. Now you are anchored amidst the tides of self-forgetting." To be anchored amidst the tides of self-forgetting. This doesn't mean when you're so anchored that you're skipping off into the sunshine and forgetting all about it and just enjoying. That's not it at all. It means experiencing all of our human reactions and something more. That being anchored amidst the tides of self-forgetting. It means not being tossed around all the time by all these stresses, the strains, the angers that are just so much with us in the world. On the human level, yes, heartbroken, and nonetheless anchored, both, not just one, not the other. So what it means is that the mind, once having struck this great thing, as Jimenez talks about, not being diverted always into something else, but remembering, not even consciously, but being present to that great thing, a knowledge that is ineradicable. It's just there as a knowledge. The connecting with the great thing that is at the depths, to use his language. Last time, what I pointed out is that to know ourselves, to truly know ourselves, not just our daily inquiry into what is going on, but the deep knowing, what Wellwood said, to know ourselves nakedly, we first need to not just know ourselves, but catch a glimpse of that great thing that Jimenez is talking about. It's glimpsing it, and secondly, appreciating what is being glimpsed. The background awareness that I spoke of in our meditation tonight, I invited you to notice beyond the breath or your body sensations, could you step back? I invited you, can you step back just for an instant and experience there's something else there? It's a background awareness that holds it all. It holds it all. Can you directly contact that? Usually our minds are busy with what's in the foreground. This case, just asking you, play. See if you can step back for a moment into the background. What I've also called here, and many others do too, natural awareness. Glimpsing it and then appreciating it for what it is. Because I suggest that what happens for us is we say, okay, I've got the space between two thoughts. Yeah, sure, that's easy enough. Yeah. Nothing happening there. And then we go right on and say, yeah, but so what? I've got this busy life. I've got stuff going on. We can glimpse it, but we don't really appreciate what has been glimpsed. Not appreciating. Yes, our daily agendas are important. We all know that. But they are relatively important as opposed to absolutely important. That great thing that Jimenez is talking about is the absolutely. To experience and appreciate that requires a flip, I'd say a radical flip in consciousness. You say, uh-oh, that sounds deep. Radical flip in consciousness. You know what? You don't have to worry about it. It happens on its own, that radical flip in consciousness. The background awareness for a moment can become the foreground. Just for a moment. You see it. It is shown. It's not just you see it. It's shown. All of this, oh. It's a big oh. It's understood. It's seen. In that background awareness, that pure awareness, our natural awareness, there is no conflict. Not about you. It's not about you having cleaned up conflict. It just isn't there. That's its nature. It isn't there. There's no conflict. It's simply an open awareness that holds it all. And by golly, in spiritual traditions across the ages, it's been talked about. In the Taoist tradition, they talk about it as the uncarved block. It's like a piece of wood that has no carving on it. It's so simple. It's so elemental. And as the Tibetans say, it's so close. We don't even see it. It's so close. This is the pure or background awareness, the natural awareness. And so this radical flip in which there is a seeing and an appreciating of the background awareness. That radical flip is the beginning of a journey, your journey, the beginning of a journey. Because Jimenez says, we're standing in the new life. Are we? He asks, has nothing happened, or am I standing in the midst of the new life? The point is, you don't just stand. Sounds like, oh, well, okay, nothing to do, just stand there and let it all unfold and all great. Sounds terrific. That's not the way it is. What happens is, with that flip happening and the new life, there's a huge something that you're called upon to do. And that is to bring your foreground of your attention, all the things that you're aware of and work with in the day, and bring it together with this background attention to, you might say, meld them, to join them. It's not all just one and not all the other. Our work is both. To align our daily life with this background awareness that always is. To let that background awareness, in fact, just shine through you. To shine through you. To recognize, oh, wait a minute, my life isn't just my agenda. So aligning together, one with the other, life with life. Because up till now, what we've done, of course, is we've fixated. We've fixated on our ideas and on our experiences and on our history and what's going on in our life. That's just the nature of human beings. We fixate on it. When the flip happens, then there's the seeing of a different wholeness, a new kind of reality. Neither alone or enough. It's together, it's both. For us to express the wholeness of who we are as human beings, we need to express both. See, the connection is really, and we need to align for the wholeness of being. And I know that there are people here who know this. I mean, I'm not giving you the gospel, the new something. This is ancient. So usually our lives are out of alignment. Usually we are fixated on the foreground of our life. We all know what that means. That's life. That's what we usually do. And then the problem with that is we suffer. We can't help but suffer. Why? Because when we are living with only the foreground of life, we're living as a me, as a you. Me's suffer. You's suffer. They can't not, because a me is separate from a you. And so then we go through all of these efforts. Oh, let me bridge this gap between the me and the you. And we work really hard to do that. Those of us with goodwill, we're really trying hard. And the paradox is it can't be done that way. A me cannot bridge the gap. Oh, yes, on a relative level, we can do a lot of bridging. Yes. But on absolute level, it is only only in this acceptance and that natural awareness, you don't have to work to bridge, because there's no gap. There's no gap on that level. So I will say that for what I'm telling you now has been a huge journey for me to really know this. I have had huge resistance over the years to this. And I'll tell you just a little bit about it from my point of view. We each have our own story. And from my point of view, when I was in my early 20s, I had a big awakening, came spontaneously. I wasn't doing any spiritual work. I didn't even know what spiritual work was. So, but an awakening happened, and it was shown. This, what I'm calling background awareness, was just shown. I didn't know where it came from, and I won't go into all of that detail. But the upshot was, when I finally got into Zen, because I did go into Zen, I heard a whole lot about farm is emptiness, and emptiness is farm, and emptiness is not different from farm, and farm is not different from emptiness. Sounded great. It's Heart Sutra, the most important of the Zen scriptures. That sounded so wonderful, and we would repeat that daily, quite a number of times. And then there were other little Zen statements, things like poetic things, like a box all with its lid, or like two arrows that in air that meet. I mean, this won't make a lot of sense to you, but the idea is bringing together two different things, and it's really one thing. Or as they also say in Zen, not two, not one. And I can tell you that for years, I repeated all that and thought it was terrific. But you know what? I never believed it. I never really believed that plain old ordinary everyday was good enough. It was not good enough. All I had to do was look around and see the misery around and the suffering to say, they can talk about a box all with its lid all they want, but I don't really go for it. So it has taken me years to see, wait a minute, for the wholeness of who we are and what we are, it's right there in the daily life. The box all with its lid. Not two different things. It's not just this natural awareness and then the foreground awareness. Together for the fullness of who we are and what we are. So for me, that was a route I've taken. You know what? It doesn't matter. You can come from whatever side or route is natural to your life. Coming from the everyday, and maybe you glimpse later on that, wait a minute, there is something more, this background awareness. It doesn't matter. The only thing is, get there. You'll see it. You see, it's not one is better than the other. It's not to idealize one path over another. No, it makes no difference whatsoever. It's just really seeing that it's about both. For you to see, not for me to say, for you to see that it is both. It is in the in the natural awareness as well as in our everyday life. And they're not two different things, and they're not the same thing. Like, whoa, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? So I call it aligning life with life. And the truth is that it only takes an instant to see background awareness and to appreciate it. You have no control over that when in the instant's going to happen, but it only takes an instant. But it takes a lifetime, I think, to align life with life. That's what takes a long time. Why? Now, this is me talking, and I'm sure there are people who know better than me, who've already done it. It's done and over. Now, I haven't quite found that's happened, but maybe someday it will. But I do know that it seems to me it's every moment holding true to what it is that you know as the background awareness, as the source of it all. This isn't a big effort. Oh gosh, I've got to hold true to it. Am I holding true to it? No, that's an ego-filled effort. What it is simply holding with appreciation what you know deeply once you do. Once you know and your ship has hit the great thing, even if it's only hit for an instant, this is not about being able to hang on to it forever and ever. That was my used to be thought. It had to be this great, tremendous, moment by moment experience. No, it's the simplest little example of life. That's good enough. That is it. So holding true is so simple. It's not an effort. It's not the kind of effort which we might call a me-filled effort. It's just being, oh, you know something. Even when you're not acting inconsistent with it, you know it. You know it's there. It is a kind of relaxing, this aligning, and that may not make a whole lot of sense. Just relaxing into what is already deeply known. Nothing else to do. Everything is it. Everything is it. So aligning is what becomes the business of your life. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you make mistakes. All is well. All is well. Now, what has struck me so strongly over the years is that our Buddhist practices work on two different levels. Our Buddhist practices work on the everyday level. Whether it's mindfulness, kindness, whatever they are, we all know what they are. How we gear our lives, how we really are trying very, very hard to practice, to become more aware, to become kinder, to open up. We understand that level, and I'll call that the personal level, or the level of our foreground awareness. We understand how that works. It's what the Buddha talked about all the time. But there's a second level on which that works. And the second level on which it works is the level of background awareness. The level of background awareness. How is that? Well, on the foreground, it's all about myself. It's not a criticism. It's just the way we are. We live through self-reflecting ideas. We have these ideas, we're living through a self. And so our practices are about a self. From the point of view of awareness, of background awareness, our natural awareness, there just is no self there. You didn't do anything. It's not your great accomplishment. Just is not there. And that means that the practices that we do, when they are practiced from that perspective, there's no self in them. I'm going to give you some examples because I know this sounds awfully abstract. But I will just say the same action can be taken on our everyday level, our foreground conscious awareness, which is self-related, not a problem. And the same action can be taken from the point of view of background awareness, no self in it. So here's an example. The precepts. Right now we have a class that we are running on Thursday nights, one night a month, on the precepts, the moral behavior. And there are 5 Buddhist precepts for lay people. No killing, or attempting to refrain from killing. I said it the wrong way. To do our best to refrain from killing. To do our best to refrain from stealing. To do our best to refrain from unwise sexual conduct. To do our best to refrain from harsh speech. And to do our best to refrain from imbibing toxicants that impede awareness. Those are the 5. Okay, so basic moral behavior, ethical behavior. We can understand this and do understand it, I think, from an everyday point of view, namely myself. We understand, and it's really clearly taught, that as soon as you get into trying to get away with something, you're going to suffer. First noble truth. You hang on to something, you're trying to get away, you kind of maybe do a little bit of a something so you have a little bit of advantage here, you'll suffer. It might be really subtle. We're not talking World War II, but it might be something very subtle. You'll notice. You'll notice. So we practice the precepts with a mind of really trying to live cleanly, trying to live according to the precepts. Why? Because we don't want to suffer ourselves, and we don't want anybody else to suffer, chances are. We don't want to bring it on other people. So that's living the precepts on the everyday level. But there is another way in which we can live the precepts. And that is living the precepts on this level of natural awareness. I'm trying to avoid the word non-duality, which I find difficult. To live the precepts on the level of pure awareness. I'll give you an example. Say you are in a really tiny parking lot, and you're backing up and you just inadvertently hit the car behind you. It's just a little tap, not a big deal. And so then you've got the question, okay, what do I do now? Probably the first thing you do is just say, oh darn, or some other expletive. After you've done that, then what do? Do you take a look and notice, nobody saw me, this probably wasn't a big deal, why don't I just leave? No damage done. Or do you get out and take a look at the car behind you, see what in fact actually happened, and if there was a dent or something, do you leave a note? That's a moral dilemma that you face. So if you're following the precepts, that's the kind of question you're going to be asking yourself. That is on the everyday the everyday relative level, our everyday awareness. Then there's another way of doing that. You're in the parking lot, you back up, you hit this little car, you say, oh darn, or something else, and then what do? Is the question. From the point of view of of natural awareness, there's really no question. You don't even have to think about it. Because you know that if you just back out and leave, you're doing that out of a sense of self, however subtle. Yeah, I'm taking a really little example. I'm not talking about you're robbing a bank, right? I'm talking about something really subtle, but something we might face daily. Oh, you realize, boy, I do that. I've already created a sense of self. I'm getting away with something. There's something there I don't want to face. I don't know if this sounds too either minor or subtle, but this is exactly the kind of thing that you face. In natural awareness, you just do what's to be done. In the first level, on the relative level, the everyday personal level, it's based on personal, self-centered thoughts. Not bad, just true. And on this other level, it's based on life-centered thoughts, your actions. Might be the same action, two different motives. Does that make sense to anybody? I'm glad to. Good, not too obscure. Yeah. Okay, so then there's another way in which these two different perspectives, the everyday, and you'll say, I can call it the universal just to get simple, our personal perspective, the universal perspective. Meditation. We meditate, we learn to meditate, and need to learn to meditate, and we work hard. We want to become more mindful, or we become more loving, more open. We want to see ourselves more clearly, because for most of us, we've been pretty obscure to ourselves, not really clear who we are. All of that is necessary, and all of that is work on the level, personal level that I've been talking about, our forefront of our attention. Meditation. So we meditate to get somewhere, and it's important, and we do it. On this other level, and that is the universal level, we no longer meditate to get anywhere, because there's a recognition that there's nowhere to get to, and no one to get there anyway. It just is. You can't make this happen, by the way. You can't say, hey, I like that one, let me try that. You hear that? There's a me in there. It can't work like that. But naturally, it can evolve like that. That's what happens. It naturally evolves when, in fact, the ship hits the great thing. It's glimpsed, it's appreciated. Then this begins to come into your life, and the aligning begins to happen. And I would just say that after my talk last time, Dan and Charlotte were talking, and they came to me, and they said, you know what? And they raised it. They said, you can see the Four Noble Truths in terms of the universal. And I didn't ask them to explain. I was hoping they were going to be here tonight. Maybe they would contribute. But I will just suggest maybe if you're interested, you might want to give it some thought. How can the Four Noble Truths be practiced or be responded to from two different levels of reality? One, our everyday level, where it is, truth number one, there's suffering in life. I suffer, we suffer. It's plain as the nose on your face. Or how can it be responded to on the universal level? I just open that up to you as if you're interested in exploring it for yourself. If you're interested in exploring it for yourself. So I will just say finally, when we practice all of this, of course we are human beings and we slip. We make mistakes. We forget. All of which is not a problem. Because you see, everything is part of natural awareness. Doesn't mean some things are and some things aren't. All the good stuff is part of natural awareness and all the bad stuff isn't. Everything is. Everything is. So when we slip, what do? Compassion. Just the same common sense. Compassion for ourselves and moving on. Moving on. So this is why I think, ultimately, although I maybe have taken this to a deeper level than you maybe have heard before, the Buddha said that his practices are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. And maybe this takes on a different perspective if you can see it in the context of what I've just been talking about now. Good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Whole different meaning added to it. Whole different meaning added to it. So I'll say in conclusion, online, I wrote the little blurb for tonight's talk, and I said that this is a talk for lovers of truth. And what I was thinking, there's something about tonight's talk that the mind does not like. This isn't too comfortable. The mind really likes to kind of cozy up into an area that we are comfortable with. And talking about hitting the great thing at the great depths and background awareness, all of that is like, what? It's pretty uncomfortable stuff. So in a way, even though you're very politely sitting here, I suspect that the mind may be off into some other place that is a little easier to kind of get hold of. So I will say I much appreciate the fact that you are still sitting here as opposed to have gotten out and walking out in the middle of this. Oh, God, I can't take another one at part of this. But also say, you know what? It's really good if you found anything here that's been said tonight disturbing. When I used to live at a Zen monastery, and they said, let the truth disturb you. And I remember talking to a monk one time about, one of the monks there, and I was telling him about something or other, I don't even remember what it was, but that I was experiencing. I said, boy, it feels like the rug has been pulled out from underneath me. He said, that's good. So if you feel like the rug in any way, maybe just a little tug under your feet, that's good. So thank you for listening. So we do have a few minutes. Anybody have any comment you'd like to make? Yeah, Rick. Yeah. Thank you, Rick. Yes. Yeah. Julie.
I appreciate.
And can you speak up?
Sure. I appreciate the teaching in new language. You said that you only used the word non-duality once, and used it to say you're trying not to say it. And for me, the language you were using was just way more accessible.
Yeah.
versus universal. That just was much more within my comprehension than this verbiage about non-duality and self.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And I think it's really interesting to hear how words can put up a barrier. It can put up a barrier. And yeah, I was really struggling against it tonight. Kept back. But yes, thank you for saying that. Yeah. Yes.
When you talk about the alignment, is it really an alignment or is it a surrender to?
Or is it just a what?
Surrender to.
Good question. Well said. I think it depends on your experience. Yeah, the point is, that's right. The point is it's got to be both. And whether it's experienced as a surrender to or an aligning can sound like there's a personal something in there, doing something, trying to get in contact. So maybe surrender is a better term, but the process, whatever term we use, the process is the same. And that surrender isn't just a willful action, although sometimes there is some will in it, but ultimately it's because there's a being drawn. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Good. Thanks. Beautiful. Well, thank you, friends. We will see you next week. Don't forget Jan Surrey next week.